He heard something strange when he stepped inside. A sound this house hadn't known in a long time. It was faint, distant, like a memory trying to come back. He followed it, unsure if he was losing his mind, or if something had found its way into his silence, and when he opened the door, what he saw stopped everything, because sometimes, when grief buries a house, grace still knows how to break in. The Miller estate had grown too quiet, not the kind of quiet that means peace, but the kind that sinks into your bones where even the walls feel heavy. After the accident, the house changed. Light didn't land the same way. Rooms stayed clean, but cold, and the boys stopped speaking. Noah and Leo were only 5, too young to carry what they carried. But after their mother died, they closed their mouths and never opened them for joy again. Robert tried everything: private therapists, top-tier nannies, every expert money could hire. But nothing reached them. They stared through people, and he stopped trying to fix it. Until one rainy afternoon, he came home early. The house was still, until he heard something. He paused in the hallway listening. It wasn't music. It wasn't crying. It was softer, lighter. He walked toward it, slow, confused, and then opened the door. And there, right in the center of his perfect white floors, was mud, everywhere. Long streaks twisted through the living room, trails of dirt, puddles of rain, and in the middle of it all, a wheelbarrow. And inside, his boys, laughing, throwing their hands in the air like they were flying. And behind them, barefoot soaked, was Patricia, the maid, spinning them like she'd forgotten rules, forgotten grief, forgotten that this house hadn't seen joy in almost 2 years. Robert stood frozen, not in anger, in something he didn't recognize at first: shock, wonder, a crack in the grief. And just then, one of the boys looked up, eyes wide, voice soft. "Mommy, look, Daddy's home." Patricia stopped, tears in her eyes, hands trembling. She didn't speak. She didn't move. The boys wrapped their arms around her. And Robert just stood there, staring, heart torn open. Because that word didn't belong to her. But they gave it, and something about that felt like heaven had stepped in without asking permission. Before we begin this story, take a moment, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you've ever seen someone show up in your life just when everything felt too broken to fix, share your story, because sometimes God doesn't send answers, He sends people. While most homes hide clutter behind closed doors, Robert Miller's mansion hid something far heavier: silence, not just in sound, but in spirit. You could feel it when you walked in, the way the light stopped short at the walls, the way the windows stayed clean, but no one ever opened them. Even the air felt cautious, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. After the accident, the staff stopped speaking above a whisper. The twins stopped speaking altogether, and Robert, he buried himself in routines so precise, even grief had to wait its turn. Wake up, gym, email, coffee, silence. Everything had a time, a place, a reason, everything except joy. It was easier that way, cleaner, until that Thursday, until the rain. He hadn't meant to come home early. A cancelled board meeting, a dead phone battery, an urge he couldn't explain. The house was unusually warm when he stepped inside. He noticed that first. Not the temperature, something else, like the air had shifted. And then that sound, that strange, impossible sound that had stopped him in his tracks. Laughter, not from a screen, not from a memory, real, alive, moving through the hallway like a song that didn't know it was trespassing. He followed it, each step slow, cautious, not out of fear, but because something sacred was happening, and he didn't want to break it. When he opened the living room door, he expected disaster. What he saw instead was resurrection. The hardwood floors were wrecked, mud everywhere, soaked rugs, streaks of dirt, a broken vase in the corner, and in the center, an old wheelbarrow, Leo and Noah tucked inside, laughing so hard their little bodies shook, arms stretched wide, eyes full of something he hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Life. And the one pushing them? Patricia, the maid, 28, soft-spoken, never in the way, not hired to care for the children, only to clean. She was barefoot now, her wet hair clinging to her neck. She looked nothing like the staff that usually passed through this house, and yet somehow, she looked like she belonged in that moment more than anyone else. She spun the wheelbarrow in clumsy circles, laughing right along with the boys, not like someone performing, like someone remembering what it felt like to be alive. Robert didn't move. Couldn't. It wasn't just the mess. It was the sound of his sons coming back. No one noticed him at first, not until Noah's eyes caught his, and everything stopped. The laughter faded. The boy's hand reached out for Patricia's sleeve. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Mommy, look, Daddy's home." Time fractured. Something holy broke open in the room. A name, spoken where it hadn't been spoken in so long. Patricia froze, her hands still on the wheelbarrow, her eyes locked with his, and for one breathless second, no one moved. Not the boys, not Patricia, not the man standing in the doorway with rain still dripping from his coat and a heart that didn't know if it was breaking or beginning to heal. Patricia stood still, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know what else to do. The wheelbarrow handles were damp in her hands. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She couldn't look at the boys, not now, not after what they'd just called her. She knew she didn't deserve it. Not that word. Not here. Her shoes were still by the back door. Her gloves were somewhere in the kitchen sink. And now her job, the one she had barely just started, was slipping right through her muddy fingers. The boys were quiet now. Noah pressed his face into her shirt. Leo held the edge of her skirt with both hands, like if he let go the moment might vanish. Across the room, Robert hadn't said a word. He just stared. His posture was straight, but everything about him looked tired. Not just physically, the kind of tired that lived in the eyes, in the way the hands stay too still, in the way a man forgets how to breathe when he's afraid of what might break next. Patricia lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice barely reached her own ears. Robert didn't answer. He looked at the trail of mud behind them, the broken line from the front hallway all the way through his spotless living room. A mess that would take hours to clean, or minutes if you knew how to care. Finally he spoke, his voice low, tired, almost distant. "You weren't hired to be near the children." It wasn't an accusation, not yet, but it wasn't a question either. Patricia nodded once. "I know." His eyes drifted to the boys, still clinging to her like she was the only safe thing in the world. He watched them for a long time, and then said the one thing she didn't expect. "Did they laugh like that before?" She looked up slowly, met his eyes for the first time. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think they have." A silence settled between them. Not heavy, not cold, just uncertain. She wanted to explain that the nanny had walked out 3 hours earlier without warning, that Leo had tripped in the hallway, burst into tears, and she didn't know what else to do but hold him, that Noah had asked if she could make the house fun again, that she didn't plan any of this, that it just happened, but she said none of it because he didn't ask, and something in his eyes said he wasn't ready for answers yet. Instead, Robert stepped aside. "Take them upstairs," he said. Then softer, "They're soaked." She hesitated, then nodded, gently turned the wheelbarrow toward the hallway, her bare feet slipping slightly on the wet wood. As she passed him, the twins still in her care, he didn't look at her. But he didn't stop her either, and somehow that was enough to make her heart tremble. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, one curled on her arm, the other against her side, Patricia stayed sitting between them, watching their tiny chests rise and fall like Grace had borrowed them for one more day. Down the hall, the mansion was still again, but something had shifted. The silence wasn't as sharp now, not as bitter, just quiet, as if the house itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Patricia stood in the hallway, hands folded, hair still damp, a knot in her stomach that wouldn't come undone. She had changed into clean clothes. The boys were tucked in, warm and breathing slow, but her heart was still running, still waiting for a door to close behind her, still expecting the words, "You're dismissed." Instead, she was summoned. One of the butlers found her in the laundry room drying her gloves on the radiator. "Mr. Miller would like to see you, in his office." Her fingers went cold. Now here she was, outside his door, trying to steady her breath, trying not to hope. She knocked gently. His voice came through the wood. "Come in." She pushed the door open. The office smelled like paper and pine. Heavy books lined the walls, untouched. A desk stood between them, thick oak, immaculate. Everything in the room was clean, controlled, except the man behind the desk. Robert sat in his chair, sleeves rolled, a pen in one hand he wasn't writing with. He didn't look up right away, just said quietly, "You know what they called you today?" It wasn't a question. Patricia stepped closer, but not too close. She nodded. "I heard it too," she said softly. Her voice felt small in the room. Robert set the pen down, pressed his fingers together. "That name, it's not a word we use lightly in this house." Patricia swallowed. "I know." She didn't defend herself, didn't reach for excuses. There were none, only truth. "I didn't ask for it," she said. "I didn't try to earn it. They just said it." Robert's jaw tightened, not in anger but in ache. "My wife died in a hospital bed," he said. His voice barely held. "The twins were there. They saw the ambulance, the noise, the doors closing." He looked away. "They haven't said that word since." The room held still. Patricia felt something press into her chest. Not guilt, but sorrow. She stepped forward, just enough to be heard. "I'm not her," she whispered. "I'm not trying to be. I know what that name means. I know who it belongs to." She looked down at her hands. "But I also know what I saw today. They weren't pretending. They weren't confused. They were happy. For the first time." Robert looked up, met her eyes. And for the first time since she arrived, his didn't hold suspicion, just exhaustion, and something softer beneath it. "I should be angry," he said, "but I'm not." He paused. "I don't know what I am." She nodded. "I understand." Silence again, but not like before. This one had breath, room inside it. Robert leaned back in his chair, glanced toward the hallway, as if he could still hear the laughter echoing from earlier. He didn't smile, but he didn't ask her to leave. And Patricia, she didn't move, not yet, because something sacred had been touched, and for reasons neither of them could explain, it was still standing. After that night, the house went quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. It was no longer a silence filled with grief. It was something different, something waiting. Robert didn't fire her. Patricia didn't pack. Nothing was said. Nothing was promised. But everything had changed. She still woke early, still kept to her tasks, washing linen, folding towels, moving through rooms like she didn't belong in them, and now, more than ever, she wasn't sure if she did. The boys noticed first. Noah stopped holding her hand when they walked down the stairs. Leo sat a little farther from her during stories. They didn't say the word again, not even by accident. They sensed the shift. Children always do. They carry the weight of what adults try to hide. Patricia didn't push. She made their cocoa just the same, tucked their blankets tighter at night, still left little drawings by their pillows when they couldn't sleep. She didn't want to ask for more than was given, didn't want to hold what wasn't hers. In her heart she repeated the same prayer each morning. "Lord, let me love them well, even if just for a little while." Robert kept his distance. He stayed later at the office, or left earlier in the morning. When he was home, he moved like a man guarding his steps, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't trust himself. More than once, he caught himself watching her, through the kitchen doorway, or from the top of the stairs. Never for long, just long enough to wonder what it was in her presence that made the air feel softer. Long enough to remember the sound of laughter and be afraid of losing it again. They didn't speak much, only when they had to, always careful. But something quiet passed between them each time their eyes met. Something not yet ready to be named. One evening near dusk, Patricia was in the den, folding a pile of the twins' clothes. The boys were upstairs with the tutor. The house was still. Robert passed the doorway, then stopped, just for a moment. She didn't see him, but he watched. Her hands moved slowly, gently smoothing each shirt before placing it down. She paused on one, a tiny blue one with a rocket stitched on the sleeve. She held it for a few seconds longer than the others. He saw it, and in that small pause, something pulled in his chest, something he didn't have the courage to face yet. So he turned and kept walking. She heard his footsteps fade down the hall and didn't look up, because that's what happens when hearts start shifting. They don't collide, they orbit, careful, unspoken, waiting for something stronger than fear to bring them closer again. The envelope came on a Thursday, thin, white, tucked between utility bills and junk mail on the corner of the kitchen counter. Patricia wouldn't have noticed it if the name hadn't been handwritten, Miss Patricia James in dark, careful script, no return address. She opened it slowly, standing by the sink with dishwater still clinging to her hands. The letter was simple. A family estate in Connecticut, full-time live-in role, private quarters, double the salary, full benefits, start date, flexible. They'd heard of her through someone who had spoken highly. She read the letter 3 times, then once more. Then folded it shut like it burned her fingers. She didn't show it to Robert, didn't mention it to the boys, didn't say a word. But something changed in her. She smiled a little less, folded things more carefully, held her breath longer than usual. She was preparing herself, not to leave, but to let go. That night, as the boys were brushing their teeth, Patricia wandered into the kitchen again. The letter still sat on the counter, unmoving, undecided. She stared at it, then turned away, only to see something taped to the fridge. A drawing. Crayon lines, uneven but full of heart. 2 stick boys, one tall man in a tie, and beside him, a woman in a blue dress, yellow gloves, and a crooked smile. Above them, written in shaky handwriting, Home. Patricia felt her knees weaken. She stepped closer, pressing her fingers against the edge of the paper, as if touching it could tell her what to do. Behind her, small feet padded softly into the room. Noah, still in pajamas, hair damp from the bath. He looked at her, then at the letter, then at the drawing. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked. His voice was small, almost afraid. She knelt slowly, met his eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly. Noah reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded sticky note, pressed it into her hand. In messy crayon, "Please don't go, Mommy." Her breath caught, not because of the word, but because of the truth in it, the need, the trust. Tears rose before she could stop them. She pulled Noah gently into her arms, held him there like she was trying to memorize his weight. Robert stood in the hallway watching. He'd seen the letter, hadn't opened it, hadn't asked, but he saw what it did to her. And now he saw her, on the floor of his kitchen, holding his son like he was hers, weeping like someone who had finally run out of places to hide her heart. He didn't step in, didn't speak. But something in him shifted, quietly, sharply. Because there are moments that don't ask for permission. They just come. And when they do, nothing stays the same. It was after midnight when Robert walked into the kitchen. The house was dark, still, except for the faint hum of the fridge and the light above the stove. Patricia stood by the counter, barefoot, robe wrapped around her. The letter lay unfolded in front of her. Beside it, the sticky note. "Please don't go, Mommy." She hadn't noticed him yet. Her fingers were pressed to her lips, her shoulders tight. Like she was holding something in, or trying not to break apart where she stood. He cleared his throat, softly. She turned, didn't smile, didn't speak, just met his eyes. For a moment, neither moved. The letter said more than either of them could. He walked closer, not all the way, just enough. His voice was quiet, like a man choosing every word carefully. "So, you're leaving?" She exhaled slowly. Not quite a yes, not quite a no. "I don't know," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wasn't looking for anything. But it came." He nodded once, not in agreement, just understanding. Silence fell again, but this one felt different, heavier. He glanced at the sticky note. "They still call you that?" She looked away. "They haven't said it again, not out loud, but it's still there." Patricia's eyes filled. She didn't blink, didn't wipe them. "They don't mean to replace her," she said gently. "They just feel safe." Robert's jaw clenched. "That name doesn't belong to anyone else." She nodded. "I know." He stepped closer now. His voice broke slightly. "That was Emily's name. She was their world. She was mine. I'm not trying to take her place, Robert. I know you're not." He looked away, then back at her. "But they're giving it to you anyway." She didn't answer, and that was the hardest part, because it was true. He leaned on the counter beside her. The silence stretched too long, tight, raw. "I don't know how to do this," he said. His voice cracked, just slightly, but enough since she died. "I've been trying to hold it all together, the house, the boys, myself." He paused. "I kept thinking, if I could control it, nothing else would break." He shook his head. "But then you came in with muddy shoes and a rusted wheelbarrow." And they laughed. They came back to life. He looked at her. "You did that." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came, just a tremble in her breath. He tapped the letter gently. "I won't stop you, if this is what you want. It's a better offer. Better life." Patricia lowered her gaze. "But what about a better home?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Soft. Real. He looked at her like she'd just said something he didn't know how to hold. Behind her, taped on the fridge, the crayon drawing still hung, the word home floating above 4 stick figures. Robert stepped back. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I know what it's not anymore." Patricia looked up. "What?" "A job." They stood in it then. The ache, the confusion, the love neither dared to name. Nothing loud, nothing clear, but something had broken, and something else had just begun. The rain came back 2 nights later, harder this time, relentless. It tapped at the windows like it wanted in. Lightning flickered above the trees. Thunder rolled low, not violent, just steady, like a memory coming too close. Patricia stood in the hallway with a towel in her hands, listening. The boys had been quiet all day. No drawings, no giggles, just small voices, short answers. They felt it too. The shift, the weight of the letter still folded in her bag, the echo of Robert's words still resting in the kitchen air. "I don't know what this is, but I know what it's not anymore." She hadn't answered. Couldn't, not yet, because part of her wanted to stay, but another part was afraid of what staying would ask of her. A siren screamed in the distance, not close, but not far. She flinched. So did the boys. Upstairs, Noah's voice broke into the silence, sharp, afraid. "Mommy didn't come back last time." The words sliced through the walls like glass. Patricia dropped the towel and ran. When she opened their bedroom door, she found them both huddled under the blanket, eyes wide, trembling. "They're taking someone again," Leo whispered. She climbed into bed between them, wrapped one arm around each. "No one's going anywhere," she said gently. But her voice shook, and they heard it. "Promise?" Noah asked. She nodded, even though she didn't know if she could. "I'm here. I'm not leaving tonight." They pressed in closer. Patricia began to hum. softly at first. An old tune, one her grandmother used to sing when the world felt too big. A hymn without words, just melody, something that didn't need explaining. Down the hall, Robert stood outside the door, listening. He didn't move, didn't go in, but his hand rested on the doorframe, fingers curled, like he wanted to knock, but didn't know what he'd say if she opened it. The sirens faded, the thunder drifted. Inside the room, the boys had stopped shaking. Noah's breath evened out first. Then Leo's hand relaxed against Patricia's arm. She watched them in the dark and wondered if love was supposed to feel this heavy, this quiet, this sacred. Robert finally turned away, walked back down the hallway, bare feet on cold floors. No destination, just moving, because part of him wanted to go back to the man he was before she came, and part of him knew that man was already gone. When Patricia slipped out of the room an hour later, she found a blanket draped over the banister. Fresh, warm. He had left it for her. She didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't wait to hear it, but she laid it gently over her shoulders and sat on the staircase, watching the rain draw lines down the glass, thinking of a house that once drowned in silence. And now, in the stillness, might finally be learning how to breathe. The anniversary came quietly. No reminders, no alarms. Just a date Robert had memorized in a way the calendar could never forget. 18 months to the day. The staff moved gently that morning. Whispers, careful steps. The boys didn't ask questions, but their eyes held something slower, softer. Every year since the funeral, Robert had done the same thing. A private dinner, no speeches, just one empty chair at the table, a space left for Emily, not for tradition, but for love. This year, Patricia didn't know what to expect. She stayed out of the way most of the day, cleaning windows that didn't need cleaning, polishing surfaces already shining. By sunset, the dining room had been set. 3 plates, 1 chair unoccupied. Robert stood by the window, watching the sky fall into dusk. The boys sat quietly at the table, hands folded. Patricia hovered near the doorway, uncertain. She hadn't been asked to join, but something in her couldn't walk away. Then Leo whispered something to Noah. The boys stood up without a word. They walked over to the long table, gripped the edge of a dining chair together, the one closest to the empty seat, and pulled it forward, right next to where their mother's space had always been. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't say a word. They simply turned and looked at Patricia. "Sit here," Noah said. Her breath caught. Robert turned slowly. His eyes moved from the boys to the chair to her. For a second, no one moved. It felt like the house itself was waiting. Patricia stepped forward, not because she thought she should, but because the moment was asking her to be brave. She didn't take the empty seat. She sat beside it, near it, not in Emily's place, but next to her memory. The boys smiled, and that was enough. Dinner was quiet. No one tried to fill the silence. No one needed to. Halfway through the meal, Robert looked at the fridge. The boys' crayon drawing was still there. The word home still floating above 4 stick figures. Next to it, a new sticky note in Robert's handwriting. Only one word, stay. Patricia saw it, but said nothing. After dinner, she began clearing the plates. She moved slowly, almost afraid that if she stepped too quickly, the moment might disappear. As she reached for Robert's dish, their hands brushed. He didn't pull away. Instead, he looked up at her, and in the quiet, something passed between them. Not a question, not an answer, but peace. The kind that only comes when you stop running from what hurts and start standing in what heals. The boys laughed softly as they chased each other into the hall, their footsteps echoing in a house that had once forgotten what children sounded like, and somewhere inside that laughter, a promise was beginning to form, unspoken but real. Because sometimes you don't rebuild a family all at once. You just pull up a chair. Spring came slowly to the Miller house, not just in weather, but in spirit. The air smelled different now. The windows stayed open longer, and for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like absence, it felt like peace. Patricia no longer waited for permission to love them, she just did. It was in the way she tied their shoes, in the songs she sang under her breath while packing lunchboxes, in the blanket forts at bedtime, and the way the boys leaned into her like roots, finding good soil. Robert noticed everything, even the things he didn't know how to speak aloud. He came home earlier now, stayed longer, laughed more. He still kept pictures of Emily on the bookshelf, still whispered her name on hard days. But the grief wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft, woven in, like the love that had begun to grow again, not in place of her, but alongside her. One Saturday morning, Robert took them all to the park. It was Emily's favorite. The boys didn't remember that, but he did. Patricia helped pack the snacks. Leo clutched her hand the whole way there. Noah carried the blanket. They ran through the grass for hours, chasing light like it belonged to them again. When they finally slowed, Robert reached into his coat and handed Patricia a small folder. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, legal documents, guardianship papers, his name, her name, and a quiet line at the bottom that said, "In the event of my absence." She didn't speak, couldn't. Robert sat beside her on the bench, watching the boys wrestle in the sunshine. "If something ever happened to me," he said gently, "I need them to have someone who makes them feel safe, and I think that someone is you." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, held the folder like it was more than paper, like it was a promise. The boys ran back, breathless and flushed. Noah crawled into her lap. Leo climbed beside her. And then, with his cheek pressed against her chest, Noah looked up and whispered, "You can be Grace and Mommy too, if you want." Her heart shattered, not in pain, but in the way something breaks open to let light in. She smiled, not big, not loud, but the kind of smile that stays. Robert didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Because healing doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's a blanket on the grass, a child's voice in your lap, a signature on a paper that says, "I trust you." That night the house didn't grow quieter. It got louder, with laughter, with pancake batter spilled on the floor, with forts made from couch cushions. The boys didn't call her the Maid anymore. They called her Mom, and Robert, he called her Patricia. But when she wasn't looking, when the house was still and the boys were safe in her arms, he called her everything he never thought he'd have again.